Ben, first and foremost, I have to be very careful how I say this. This is a Freudian slip waiting to happen. Are you pro bankers' bonuses?
I am pro removing the cap on bankers' bonuses. I'm pro free markets determining what their remuneration should be. And if you look back at why this regulation was brought into play in the first place, it was really the European Union after the financial crisis seeking to put a lid on the success of the city. And it used the financial crisis as an excuse to do it. And people may or may not remember, but actually when this cap on bonuses was brought in, which effectively legislates against more than one or twice their annual salary being paid in a bonus, salaries went up to compensate, making actually the city less competitive. You know, when you compare it to New York and Japan, and in those days, Hong Kong less so now. So the reason the EU did it really was to constrain the city. And I'm utterly delighted that Kwasi is having the courage to remove this cap at a time when, as you say, politically, it looks a bit dangerous to be doing it.
But what justifies a banker's bonus? How big a banker's bonus are we actually talking about here? And lifting the cap on it, I need a little bit of context. If I, was a particularly massive banker, Ben, how much money would I be expecting to bring home?
Well, the point is, you could bring home millions and millions if you're successful for your bank. And so the chief executive of Goldman Sachs, I think, for example, earns 50 million a year or thereabouts.
So he's one of the biggest bankers out there.
He would pay a very significant part of that to the exchequer. And that's the point. It comes back into the UK's exchequer. It comes back into our economy. So what we don't do is improve the lot of the United Kingdom's economy by holding back prosperity in the city. What we do is enable them to make money so that we collectively all benefit.
Yeah, and this is the thing, but I suppose the flip side of it, and maybe this actually is a key dividing line now, which arguably has been blurred potentially during the Boris Johnson government, which is actually a key difference in economic ideology. So potentially Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng going for growth, whereas you've got the Labour lot on the other side of the benches there saying, hang on a minute, a cost of living crisis when people are skinned, you can't give this bunch of bankers a new pay rise, can you?
Yeah, but the point is the pay rise, and it's not going to be a pay rise. The pay rise isn't going to be born out of suddenly increasing the pay of people who are already working in the city. The way that the pay rise is going to happen is by making the city more competitive, drawing in talent from New York and Japan that has left because the EU brought this cap in the first place, attracting them back, propelling the city, making more money in the city, and therefore collectively benefiting all of us. The pay rise comes out of performance. It doesn't come out suddenly, immediately, because the regulation has been removed. The removal of the regulation creates the ability to make more money. And that's what Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng mean when they say going for growth. And you're quite right, Patrick. It's a complete break from 12 years of conservative government ideology. And this was the big debate between Sunak and Truss. Truss wants to deregulate and cut taxes generally, not just on bankers' bonuses, not to just deregulate bankers' bonuses, but to cut taxes and deregulate generally so that there's less power in the state, less money going to the exchequer, more money in our back pocket, empowering the electorate to make their own decisions so that we invest for our own futures. And that is the traditional way to get an economy going. The Conservatives have lost sight of that, and I'm delighted that Truss is now taking the country back in the right direction. And I'm delighted Kwasi is prepared to have this potentially politically difficult battle, right now, because it shows that they've got intent.
Well, I suppose if it pays off, for want of a better phrase, then actually, as long as our economy booms and our economy grows, then actually everyone else will shut up. But one of the key elements of this, so one of the reasons why they want to potentially scrap the cap on bankers' bonuses, is to make our city more competitive. Where is our city in terms of ranking in terms of competitiveness with, that load of bankers in France or the ones in New York?
Well, we rank behind New York. We've always pretty much ranked behind New York. We're about 10 times bigger than Frankfurt as a financial center. And I think about 20 times, the slightly historic figures I'm pulling from my memory, but about 20 times bigger than Paris. And by the way, you might recall, Patrick, when we voted to leave the EU, everyone said jobs would be lost hand over fist from the city. Actually, that didn't happen. But what we have done is see a lot of business move to the States and move to Japan because they can get better remuneration there. And what we wish to do is to bring that business back to London. One of the best things that Boris Johnson failed to do was signing a deal with the EU over financial services. A lot of people in the city were championing that, wanting a deal with the EU. They feared that the city would suffer if we didn't get a deal. But actually, the city now is poised, much better off, able to deregulate, take away cap on bankers' bonuses, which wouldn't have been allowed if we'd done a deal with the EU. We can now deregulate something called Solvency II, which puts a cap on the amount of money that insurance companies can invest in certain asset classes. You know, we can take that away, liberating billions potentially to be invested in the British economy. We can deregulate MiFID II, which is another EU invention that holds back. I run a small business, and MiFID II has been disastrous for small listed companies because it takes attention away from us and puts it on big institutions. So I'm delighted that they're doing all of this. I'm delighted we don't have a deal with the EU over financial services, and I'm delighted that this cap on bonuses, which is, you know, potentially politically a hot potato, but absolutely the right thing to be doing for the economy.